Thank you. The next item of business is a statement by John Swinney on an update on the MV Bella-1. The First Minister will take questions at the end of his statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the First Minister.
President, Sir, there has been significant and appropriate public interest in the MV Bella-1, which is currently in the Moray Firth. Interest in the well-being of the crew, but also in the wider questions in relation to Scots law, jurisdiction and information sharing between Scottish authorities, the Scottish Government and the United Kingdom Government. There has also been litigation raised, including a judicial review application which remains live, so I am under some restrictions as a result, but I believe it is important that I set out everything it is appropriate to share with Parliament, given the issues that have been raised. On the 7th of January, the United States, supported by British forces, took action to intercept the oil tanker known as Bella-1. The Scottish Government has been clear that it supports that action. Where international sanctions are applied, this Government is a firm supporter of those sanctions being enforced. There is no point to imposing sanctions on governments that ignore international law, undermine the rule of law and illegally invade their neighbours, as Russia has invaded Ukraine, if you are not willing to take action to enforce those sanctions. This Government also supports the assistance provided by the United Kingdom Government in the operation to take control of the Bella-1. I believe in international cooperation, in partnership and in countries standing together. That support is founded on a basic belief that if we are to succeed in insisting on a rules-based international order based on international law, we must also abide by those self-same rules-based processes and international laws. The seizure of the Bella had clear implications and impacts on Scotland, given the location of its seizure and now subsequent events. I therefore wrote to the Prime Minister on the 8th of January and requested that in future the Scottish Government should receive formal, secure pre-notification of such actions where they involve Scottish infrastructure or have implications for Scotland. This would ensure that both governments work constructively together. Presiding Officer, the importance of that joint working, the need for Scotland's input, became glaring when the Bella-1 appeared in the Moray Firth on the 13th of January. I understand why the United Kingdom Government agreed to a request for the Bella-1 to enter UK territorial waters. The vessel was in need of repair. It is perfectly obvious to any objective observer, however, that if you bring a vessel such as the Bella-1 into Scottish waters, coordination with Scottish authorities is essential. The arrival of the Bella-1 in the Moray Firth was an issue of direct relevance to Scotland and to the Scottish Government, yet the United Kingdom Government still did not give us advance notification. Yet there is an unarguable truth that cooperation and communication between the Scottish and United Kingdom Governments is essential if we, in the Scottish Government, are to fulfil our responsibilities. The fact of legal action being brought in the Scottish courts shows clearly that Scotland should have been involved from the very start. Scotland's law officers were required to respond to that legal action because the vessel was in Scottish jurisdiction. The Lord Advocate exercises her authority on these issues independently of the Scottish Government, indeed independently of anyone else, and solely in the public interest. Throughout this episode, the Lord Advocate's priorities have been twofold. Firstly, to ensure that she discharged her duties in terms of international cooperation in criminal investigations, and secondly, she has been concerned that the ECHR rights of the crew should be maintained, including their health and welfare. It is the long-established and understood convention that the details of legal advice of the law officers are not made public. It is also the case that relationships between international jurisdictions, such as that between Scotland and the United States, are established and maintained through handling areas of mutual interest with sensitivity and confidentiality, and I respect that. Once the Bella-1 was in the Moray Firth, questions were understandably raised about the welfare of the crew, with ongoing discussions between the UK and the Scottish Governments. The Scottish Government's understanding is that the Bella-1 crew comprised 28 individuals of different nationalities. We understand 2 of those individuals had been arrested by the United States Government as part of the initial action. It is important to make clear that while the Bella-1 was in Scottish waters, at no point were the UK or Scottish authorities in control of the vessel and the Scottish authorities had no legal basis whatsoever for boarding the vessel at any time. Information about the crew was provided by the US authorities and then to the Scottish Government either through local partners or the UK Government. Reassurance was provided by the US Government that the individuals were in good health. Both the UK Government and the Crown Office made clear our expectation that all 28 would disembark the vessel. The UK Government agreed to a request from the US Government to provide support in repatriating the 26 members of the Bella-1 crew who had not been arrested. Current plans have all of these 26 crew members repatriated to countries of their choice over the course of today and tomorrow. A request for mutual legal assistance, MLA, was issued by the US authorities on the 16th of January 2026 to the Lord Advocate as the central authority for mutual legal assistance in criminal matters, seeking approval for steps to be taken in relation to the obtaining of evidence. This was considered by the Lord Advocate, who indicated that this request would be granted subject to specific assurances and conditions attached to ensure the safety and the well-being of the crew and to ensure that the rule of law was upheld. A key requirement was that all 28 were brought ashore to ensure that this was appropriately and lawfully handled. She was advised on the 25th of January 2026 that the request for MLA was withdrawn, and this was confirmed in writing on the 26th of January. To the extent that the Lord Advocate has any responsibility, it is as head of the System for the Prosecution of Crime in Scotland, and therefore the central authority in matters involving the investigation of international crime. As a result of the MLA request being withdrawn, the Lord Advocate's role concluded. The Court of Session heard yesterday, and I want to be clear today, that the Lord Advocate fully discharged all of her responsibilities in this regard. Given the previous concerns that I have set out about communication, it is important to acknowledge that good local partnership arrangements were established between Border Force, Police Scotland and local partners. Partnerships that were focused on developing a proposal to support the crew to leave the vessel, to access appropriate support on arrival and to establish their preference for next steps. The operation has rightly been led by Border Force as the relevant government agency. However, these discussions have been supported by local partners focused on the welfare of the crew. The crew disembarked from a tender vessel into Buckie Harbour on the afternoon of 26th of January. They were then transferred to Inverness for processing by Border Force in line with standard operating processes. The timing of the operation to support the crew in leaving the vessel was governed in large part by the weather. Any transfer of crew needs to be done safely. The detailed plan for the transfer of the crew and the timing of that was an operational decision. The Scottish Government ministers were informed of the arrangements. It was very clear that the role of Border Force and the UK Government was to facilitate the voluntary repatriation of the crew, individuals who had not been arrested and had not been accused of any offence. This operation was not about arresting or forcibly removing individuals. It was supporting them in their onward journey to a location of their choice. The Scottish ministers and the Lord Advocate have never at any point detained any of the crew, and they have never had them in their control. Assistance has been offered by a variety of Scottish authorities, including the police and local authorities, but no individual has been arrested or detained by any Scottish authority. They have not and have no power to make any order to remove the crew from the jurisdiction of the court. All that they can do is provide assistance with any voluntary departure. Presiding Officer, I appreciate there has been considerable interest in the position of the two individuals who had been subject to arrest. The Lord Advocate's response to the MLA request made clear her position that they should be brought to the mainland in accordance with due process. The Scottish Government is a respondent to a live judicial review relevant to these issues. Therefore, there are limits to what I can say on this point. I want to be very clear, though, that the Scottish Government was informed that the two individuals had been removed from the Bella-1 by the United States after they had been removed from that vessel, not before. Presiding Officer, the action to intercept the Bella-1 started as an international exercise. an exercise which the UK Government suggested we did not need to be informed about because it did not impact on devolved matters. That position was inadequate at the time, and it feels even more unrealistic given what has happened subsequently. We need proper lines of communication from the UK Government and an acceptance of the principle of advance notification of significant military operations which impact on our devolved responsibilities and the use of Scottish infrastructure. The events of the last fortnight demonstrate Scotland is not isolated from international events. Our geographical position placed us at the forefront of events around the Bella-1. This is unlikely to be the last time that is true. We need to be in a position to work together constructively in the interests of security and the safety of people across Scotland. I give my commitment to joint working with the United Kingdom and international partners in pursuit of international law. That will always be the commitment of Scotland.
Thank you. The First Minister will now take questions on the issues raised in his statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we'll move on to the next item of business, and I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press their request to speak buttons. I call Neil Bibby to be followed by Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the First Minister for advance sight of his statement. The whole of this Parliament has been clear in its condemnation of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So action taken to tackle the shadow fleet that fuels Vladimir Putin's war machine is welcomed by my party, and I acknowledge the First Minister has made clear in his statement support for this action. Following the interdiction of this vessel in international waters by American forces, the tanker's arrival in Scottish waters necessarily meant engagement and communication between the UK Government and the Scottish Government in relation to their legal obligations. Can the First Minister tell Parliament whether he or the Scottish Government's Permanent Secretary have received security briefings on the tanker from the United Kingdom Government in recent weeks? First Minister.
First of all, Mr Bibby is correct that the Government supports the actions taken to apply sanctions to the Shadow Fleet, and I reaffirm that position and acknowledge his support for that position. It's important that that action is taken, but the fundamental point of my statement is that there has to be a recognition that the issues that arise out of actions in this respect are likely and potentially inevitably going to have an effect on the powers and responsibilities of the Scottish Government when these actions take place in our territorial waters. And there has to be, at the earliest possible opportunity, the strongest level of communication in this respect and advance notification to enable us to prepare for such events. That did not happen in this case, despite prompting from me to the United Kingdom Government. And I want a lesson to be learnt from this, that it is important this happens in future, because I suspect we will deal with situations of this type again. In relation to security briefings have now been provided to the Permanent Secretary and to me, and I will continue to pursue these, because it is an essential part of my ability to lead a government which takes forward issues in devolved areas which are impacted by international issues, to be fully aware of the implications and consequences of UK Government actions.
Ross Greer.
Thank you. 2 people have been abducted from Scotland in the middle of the night by the US military, despite our highest court ordering that they be kept here under our jurisdiction. The First Minister has spent months trying to charm Donald Trump. This strategy has failed. He's not our ally. He is a fascist. Our sovereignty has been violated. Our courts have been defied. And a foreign military has abducted 2 people from our territory. The Scottish and UK governments need to respond to this. The US military uses Prestwick Airport as a de facto base. That airport is owned by the Scottish Government. Will the First Minister show Trump that his piracy has consequences? Will he evict all American troops from Prestwick Airport immediately?
First Minister.
President Officer, I understand the strength of feeling on this issue, and that's why I've come to Parliament to give this statement, because it is so important that I am clear with Parliament and with the public that in every respect the proper application of the legal processes of Scotland have been applied in this case. Now, what the Scottish Government cannot do, what the Lord Advocate cannot do, is cannot exercise powers we do not have. So I made a point in my statement that at no stage did we have the legal basis to board that vessel. And that limits what the Scottish Government can do, but what it indicates, and what we have indicated, is that where individuals have to, there is to be any question of interaction with the legal process, those individuals have to be able to exercise their rights in the Scottish jurisdiction, which of course, as Mr Greer knows, will involve ECHR rights as well. So all of these factors, I want to assure Mr Greer that all of these factors and powers have been properly and fully applied by the Lord Advocate. Now, in relation to his points in connection with Prestwick Airport, Prestwick Airport operates at arm's length from the Government. It has particular responsibilities to exercise, and we will consider the issues that are raised by Mr Greer in his question.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I am slightly concerned by Ross Greer's use of the term piracy. We should be in no doubt that vessels of the Russian shadow fleet are evading sanctions, and as by so doing, they're assisting Putin's war machine, extending the suffering of the people of Ukraine. They are fair game, and I and my party welcome their seizure. But oil tankers are not the only hostile agents operating in and near our waters. We know that subsea cables, particularly supplying our Northern Isles, are targets or potential targets for sabotage. What reassurance can the First Minister offer our constituents that both our governments are acting collaboratively to counter threats from hostile powers, both in our waters and under them?
First Minister.
I think it's important that we have a very active and visible and effective naval defence presence to ensure that our infrastructure is being protected, given the significance of the dependence that we have on that infrastructure. And it will be, it is very extensive now, that reliance on that infrastructure, and therefore it is important that deployment of resources are undertaken in a way to ensure that's the case. I don't think that is the current arrangement in the deployment of naval resources, and it's an issue that requires to be addressed by the United Kingdom Government, who have reserved responsibility for all of these questions, including ensuring that naval resources are deployed in a way that meets the needs of the infrastructure of Scotland.
Rona Mackay, to be followed by Pauline McNeill.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's critical that in cases where military actions involve Scottish infrastructure has implications in Scotland, that the Scottish Government is formally notified. Can the First Minister say any more about the implications when inadequate communication, what it can have on the ability of the Scottish Government to discharge its responsibilities effectively?
First Minister.
So part of what I've been trying to do in this case is ensure that ministers are able to exercise their responsibilities to the fullness of their responsibilities. But we cannot do that if we are not given adequate engagement about the issues with which we are wrestling. And despite making a request to the UK Government for advance notification of the operation in relation to the seizing of the tanker, I was then very surprised that in the light of that we were not given advance warning that the United Kingdom Government had agreed that the Bella-1 should be brought into the Moray Firth, because that immediately brings the vessel into the jurisdiction of Scots law and the Lord Advocate, and that is an issue that should really concern this Parliament.
Pauline McNeill, to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
I thank the First Minister for providing some clarity of what have been complex events over the last 2 weeks. The First Minister will be aware that shadow fleets are becoming increasingly common, with Venezuela, Iran and Russia all accused of using them to avoid sanctions on oil. Financial intelligence firm S&P Global estimates that 1 in 5 oil tankers worldwide are used to smuggle oil from sanctioned countries. In France, seized the second tanker from Russia shadow fleet recently. But what I want to ask the First Minister, since he mentioned the question of the 26 crew members in Aberdeen, that can he confirm indeed that the human rights have been upheld and the ECHR has been applied with? And does he agree that this should be a case wherever this happens across Europe?
First Minister.
In relation to the 26 individuals, there has been no legal issue with those individuals. They were transferred voluntarily to Scottish soil. There was no reason for them to be detained. They were never at any stage detained by the authorities in Scotland. They were supported in terms of accommodation and assistance with transport, and the logistical arrangements are in place. And the expectation is that either today or tomorrow, all of those individuals will have left Scotland to destinations of their choice, where they're going to voluntarily. The Parliament, Neil, raises what is an absolutely critical issue in all of this, which is about the application of ECHR rights to individuals. And that is the fundamental point, or one of the fundamental points, that the Lord Advocate has been anxious to be assured about, that in terms of the response of the offer to the request for mutual legal assistance, the Lord Advocate made clear that the rule of law would have to be followed in that process, and that would involve respecting the ECHR rights of all individuals involved.
Stuart McMillan, to be followed by Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There are many concerning elements about what's happened, but particularly the correspondence the First Minister received from the Secretary of State for Scotland was very concerning. It completely failed to respect the principles and the practical realities of devolution, and that's before mentioning the importance of cooperation and courtesy in intergovernmental working. So, notwithstanding some of the responses the First Minister has already given this afternoon, and also following the further engagement with the UK Government, is the First Minister convinced that the Secretary of State and other Labour UK Government ministers now have a better understanding and also the importance of devolution, but also the adequate communication on such matters?
First Minister.
Sir, in a letter to me of the 15th of January, the Secretary of State for Scotland indicated that in relation to my media comments about the lack of advance briefing about the movement of the Bella-1 into the Moray Firth, the Secretary of State said that this operation was in defence of UK national security and our relationship with a key international ally. As such, it would not have been appropriate to provide briefing in advance to Scottish ministers. Now, that should be of concern to every single member of this Parliament, because the minute that vessel came into the Moray Firth and into our territorial waters, the legal jurisdiction of Scotland is engaged. And there is a fundamental lack of understanding of the implications. And that's why I'm giving this statement to Parliament today, because I want to assure Parliament and the public that in all of the actions here, the Scottish Government has fully exercised its legal responsibilities and has attempted to do so, but there have been significant challenges in the flow of information which limit our ability to do so, and I do hope that lessons have been learned in the United Kingdom Government about that, and we are pressing for that to be the case.
Claire Adamson, to be followed by Mercedes Vialba.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I understand that the vessel is still berthed in the Moray Firth. Can the First Minister update on any correspondence he's received from the UK Government regarding the next steps for the vessel?
First Minister.
So the vessel is currently berthed in the Moray Firth and it's undergoing repairs. We are currently seeking further information from the United Kingdom Government on the next steps for the Bella-1. I am, of course, anxious to ensure that all issues in that respect have been properly considered, particularly issues of any risks to the natural environment, which is an issue of deep concern to all of us, and we continue to press for those assurances to be offered.
Mercedes Vialba, to be followed by Keith Brown.
Thank you. As the First Minister has outlined, for well over 2 weeks, the Marinera and the vessel's crew were in Scottish waters, in Scottish legal jurisdiction. This week, the US Coast Guard has removed the tanker's captain and first officer from UK waters. The Scottish Government claims to be committed to human rights at home and abroad, but legal experts have already questioned the legality of the Marinera's seizure, to which the First Minister lent his support. So I asked the First Minister, given the length of time which the crew of the Marinera were held in Scotland, did he make any effort to seek guarantees from the US Coast Guard that it would uphold the human rights of those sailors taken out of UK waters?
First Minister.
At all times, the Scottish Government has acted to ensure that the the rights of individuals were protected and that the rule of law was applied. As I've indicated in my statement, there is no legal basis for the Scottish Government or anyone acting on our behalf to board the vessel. There is a practical limitation on being able to seek assurances, but we sought assurances from the UK Government and the US Government about the welfare of individuals involved. Now, on the question of the actions in relation to the seizing of the vessel, I think there is widespread public and parliamentary concern about the shadow fleets. These are initiatives to avoid sanctions, and my position is clear on the record that where sanctions are applied, we should ensure that they are enforced in order to do all that we can to try to avoid fuelling the regimes that are causing such horror for the people of Ukraine, for example, in the Russian example, and to make sure people are held to account for their actions.
Keith Brown, to be followed by Patrick Harvie.
If we are serious about our commitment to uphold international law, sanctions need to be both credible and enforceable. Supporting their objectives while hesitating to back enforcement, including action against a tanker allegedly breaching sanctions, raises questions about that commitment. Does the First Minister agree that backing the international rules-based order means backing action when necessary?
First Minister.
Yeah, I take that view. I think we've been well served. It's not been perfect, but we've been well served by an international rules-based system. And I think we should continue to do everything we can to encourage all states to contribute to a rules-based international order to ensure that we can continue to live in peace and stability where the rule of law is a certainty that is guaranteed for all.
Patrick Harvie, to be followed by George Adam.
We can all unite in opposition to the illegal war against Ukraine and to the operation of the Shadow Fleet or anything else that funds Putin's war machine. But none of us could credibly suggest that the Trump regime is motivated in this matter out of a deep commitment to international law. Surely the First Minister will agree at a basic level that the Trump regime has shown contempt for international law and contempt for the Scottish courts.
First Minister.
Well, what I want to assure Patrick Harvie about is that in every single step of the government's actions and the actions of the Lord Advocate, the assertion of the rule of law and the assertion of the scope and the requirements of the jurisdiction of Scotland and the protection of the human rights of individuals has been the central consideration that's been applied by every action of the Scottish Government and the Lord Advocate.
And George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In situations like this, the UK and Scottish Governments need to be able to work constructively together in the interest of security and good governance. It's extremely disappointing that in this case that did not happen. Can the First Minister advise what steps he thinks should be taken to ensure that a more constructive approach can be taken in future?
First Minister.
So the fundamental point that I've made in my correspondence to the United Kingdom Government is that there is not a neat separation between devolved and reserved responsibilities. As we've seen in this case, an issue which is undertaken under the reserved responsibilities of the United Kingdom Government can very quickly have implications for the devolved government in Scotland and our devolved responsibilities. And I don't think due regard has been taken to that in any of the consideration about briefing or engagement or information in the early days of this by the United Kingdom Government. Now, there have been good examples of collaboration between Border Force and Police Scotland and NHS Highland on local issues. So it demonstrates it's perfectly easy for it to be done. But I think there is a lesson about the way in which these issues should be pursued, which needs to be learnt, and I intend to pursue that with the UK Government.
Thank you. That concludes the statement, and I will allow a moment or two for front benches to organise for the next item of business.